Hey friends, welcome back to my kitchen. If you're new here, my name is Jen and I do cooking and canning videos, and sometimes I post garden content. If that seems like the sort of thing that you'd be into, I hope you'll consider subscribing and sticking around. Today I'm going to show you how to make a Bailey's chocolate pie. This is mostly a no-bake pie, and the original recipe comes from delish.com. As always, I will leave a link to the original recipe below so that, the creator of the recipe gets credit due. But we're going to start off making an Oreo pie crust. Now you can buy an Oreo crust from the store, which is what I was originally going to do, but I couldn't find them anywhere. So I'm making my own. So all I'm going to do is pulse in my food processor about 22 whole Oreo cookies with the cream filling until they're small crumbs. And then to them, I'm going to add about 5 tablespoons of melted unsalted butter. And then it's going to take a little time. It's going to start off really sandy, but I'm going to just mix it really well for a little while until all of these cookie crumbs have butter on them and there are no dry spots left in the bowl. Now, if you've mixed for a while and you find that your mixture is very, very wet, you can go ahead and grind up a couple more cookies and add those crumbs to this to make it slightly drier. You want it to be kind of a sandy texture, formable when you press on it with a spatula. If it's not wet enough, if you find that it's still really dry, add another tablespoon of melted butter and then go ahead and mix that in. I'll be sure to leave the amounts for the Oreo cookie pie crust down below in the description box, and they will make enough to do a 9-inch pie dish. Uh, if you're going to do a deep dish 9-inch pie dish, you might want to do a few more cookies in your mixture, because you can see here that this is just a standard size 9-inch pan, and my cookie crumbs did not go all the way up to the top, which I was totally okay with. But if you want them to go all the way to the top, you definitely want to use more cookies. Now there's a couple of ways that you can press your cookie crumbs in. I have found the easiest way is to just use the bottom of my 1 cup measuring cup and just press it out on the bottom, get it nice and level, and as you press out from the middle towards the sides, it will press the cookie crumbs up the sides. And then you just use your fingers and the side of the measuring cup to sort of tamp those in. I have also seen people lay a piece of saran wrap, plastic wrap, over top of their pie dish and use their fingers to press the Oreo crumbs in. So honestly, whichever works easiest for you, you can even use the back of a spoon. I have just found that a measuring cup makes the least amount of mess and makes it go the fastest. So once you get your Oreo crumbs all pressed into shape, you're going to bake this in the oven at 350 for 10 minutes and then let it cool completely before you're ready to go ahead and assemble your pie. Now, somehow or another, I thought I hit record, but I didn't. So in this bowl, I have a large box of chocolate pudding mix. It's the 5.9-ounce box. And I also have 2.5 cups of cold milk. And I'm about to add a 1/2 cup of Bailey's. If you do not want Bailey's in this, you want it non-alcoholic, just use a full 3 cups of milk. Now, I would like to point out that the original recipe on Delicious website calls for 2.5 cups of milk and a 1/4 cup of Bailey's. I added a 1/2 cup of Bailey's since the pudding recipe on the box called for 3 full cups of liquid. So I'm just going to get this all mixed in together, and because it's pretty warm in my house, I'm going to stick this bowl in my refrigerator for just a couple minutes until this pudding sets up. I think I gave it all of about 5 minutes. I took a phone call, and by the time I was done, the pudding was done. So I'm going to mix it up really well. It wasn't in the refrigerator long enough to form a skin. If you're going to leave your pudding in the refrigerator for an extended amount of time, you need to press some saran wrap into the top so that you don't get a weird skin on top of it. So I'm just going to mix that up really well. And I'm going to put about half of this pudding into my pie crust and just spread it out really well all the way around. And as I pointed out before, my Oreo crust does not go all the way up, but it turns out that this was still perfect because by the time I added in the other half of my pudding and the whipped topping, it came right up to the top of the pie pan, and after chilling, the slices were still perfect. So half of your pudding mix in, and then I'm going to sprinkle on a little more crushed Oreos. This just gives your pie a little texture in the middle. And you guys know, if you've been here for a little while, I love being a little extra. So take a couple of seconds, sprinkle some Oreos in there. And then I also have some of the mini chocolate chips. I'm going to sprinkle some of these right on top of the Oreo pieces. Now, you don't have to do this, but I really do think it's a nice touch to the pie that when you bite into it, the whole center of it isn't just pudding. It has some texture, it has some chew to it, and the little crunchy bits kind of are a little surprise in the middle. So once you've done that, go ahead and carefully add the rest of your chocolate pudding to the top of that and smooth it out the best you can. I'm going to try really hard here to keep from disrupting all of the Oreo pieces and the chocolate chips, and for the most part, I did an okay job of that. But, you know, we're about to cover this up with a ton of whipped cream, and nobody's going to notice if you mess this up. Again, I'm going to make the recommendation that if this pie is going to be sitting for any length of time while you make your whipped cream, go ahead and cover it with saran wrap and stick it in the refrigerator so that it doesn't develop a skin on top. There's just something about pudding, it gets this weird thick film over the top of it, and that will add like a really unpleasant texture to your pie. So if you're not going to be quick about the whipped cream, go ahead and get this covered and in the fridge. I am making my whipped cream from scratch. So I'm using 2 cups of heavy cream here. And in this, I'm going to put about 3 tablespoons of just white sugar. And I'm also going to add a little splash of Bailey's. Now, again, if you are making this non-alcoholic and you do not want to use the Bailey's in this recipe, just substitute the Bailey's here for about a teaspoon or 2 of vanilla, and it will be perfectly fine, and it will be just as good when you're finished. Now, if you're not into making your own whipped cream, you can absolutely use store-bought like Cool Whip, and I just suggest adding a little Bailey's or a little vanilla into it. But if you are making your whipped cream like this, just be patient, and you want to make sure that you whip this until you have some soft peaks, because this whipped cream needs to be able to sit on top of your pie. And as you can see here, we finally reached soft peaks, and overall it took about 5 minutes, so just be patient. When I get my whipped cream done, I'm just going to put dollops of this whipped cream around this pie. And I found that this is much easier to spread the whipped cream around without making a disaster of a mess. I could turn the bowl over and scoop it out onto the top of the pie, and I may end up with too much. I may end up with it overflowing the edges. So what I do here is I just dollop it around the pie until I have basically enough to cover the pie. And then I just go back with my spatula and kind of smooth it out. Now I did have some whipped cream left over. My husband took care of that for me. He ate it. But, you know, you can pile this whipped cream up just as high as you want to pile it. Pile it to the sky if that makes you happy. But I just went with, like, you know, a normal size layer over the top. And I'm not going for perfection when I'm smoothing it out here. It's kind of, you know, homey and rustic. And I just get most of the lumps and bumps out of it because I am going to be even more extra when it comes to decorating this pie. So I started off by just sprinkling on some regular old unsweetened cocoa powder because I think it adds a really nice, strong chocolate flavor. And then I just put some of those leftover Oreo cookies around the edges. I actually thought about just making a solid circle of Oreos around the outside, but thought, you know, that might be too much. So I sprinkled on some crushed up cookies and some more of those little mini chocolate chips, and that was my Bailey's chocolate pie. And I thought it was beautiful. Now, here's where I say, do what I say, not what I do. You need to cover this and put this in the refrigerator for at least a couple of hours because I went to cut a piece of this for my husband right away rather than chilling it, and it all just kind of fell to pieces. It was still really soft and it hadn't set up. But after this had been in the refrigerator for a couple of hours, when my son went to cut a piece, it came out in one solid piece and it didn't run all over the plate. So definitely let this hang out in the refrigerator before you try it. So that's all I have for you today, friends. I really hope that you give this really simple pie a try. And if you do, definitely leave me a comment below and let me know what you thought about it. And until next time, friends, happy cooking!